Hey there, welcome back. My name is Katie and this is Louisiana Cooking and Living, and I think I'm a little crooked. And it's time to restock our pantry. We are low on a few items, and January is a good month to restock those items that you are running low on when you're not busy working out in the garden or whatever it is you do the rest of the year and when you're just at home in the wintertime not doing much. So today we are doing a big canning day. I'm going to divide this up into 4 videos, and you can see all my canning jars over here on the counter. I have some on the counter here in front of me, and this video is going to be chicken stock or broth. There's a difference between stock and broth, and when I take you back to yesterday when I started this whole process, we boil the chicken and that gives us chicken stock. But then whenever I debone the chicken and then put the bones back in the pot and let it simmer for almost 24 hours, then we're getting some bone broth. So I don't have any chicken broth on my shelf right now. I have some ham broth and I have some beef broth and I have some shrimp stock, but I don't have any chicken broth. So we got to get some of that going. And also have, if you're interested in watching other videos, I've got some spaghetti sauce simmering right here. We're going to be making some strawberry preserves, and we're going to be doing some canned pinto beans. So you can check out those videos, and I'll leave my whole canning and food preservation playlist at the end of this video, and you can check out many more canning videos if you're interested in that. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, I'll take you back to yesterday when we started all this chicken, and then we'll come back and start canning it up. So here in my stock pot, I have 2 whole chickens that I have bought that were pasture-raised organic chickens, and I'm going to cover these with water, and we're going to boil these up and to be able to have our chicken meat deboned off the bones to be able to use for one application, and then we will put their bones back into our stock pot and we will boil those for about 24 hours to make our bone broth. So here I'm just covering it up with water. And then I like to season my broth very neutrally in case I use it for different, like if I use it for gumbo, I want it seasoned one way. If I use it for soup, I'll need it a different way. So here I'm just going to put some salt and pepper in it. You can always put some onion, some celery, carrots, herbs, red pepper. I mean, you could season this up any way you want. But I'm just going to try and keep it very neutral right now. So there's my salt and pepper. We're going to put this on to boil, and then I'll bring it down to a simmer. I don't like to boil my chicken. I like to simmer it. All right, so right now I have simmered my chicken for about an hour until it was done. I've pulled it out and put it in these bowls to allow it to cool. And I'm picking the chicken meat off the bones and then putting the bones back into the stock. At this point, the stock is very flavorful, and there's so many times that I will just cook a chicken like this, and like if I'm making chicken and dumplings, and then put the meat back into the stock, and then I will make my chicken and dumplings right then with the stock. But I'm making broth today, so I'm going to pull the meat off the bones and then put the bones back in the stock. When we let this simmer for 24 hours to make our broth, what's happening is we're pulling the nutrients and collagen out of the bones and allowing that to fill our stock with all those nutrients and collagen, and then that's when we have the broth and have all those health benefits along with the bone broth, the stock. Now it's the broth. So I'm just going to get all this meat picked off the bones and then put the bones into the stock. And this meat can be used to make, like I said, chicken and dumplings. You can make gumbo. You can make a chicken soup. You can make a pasta.
You can make chicken salad, a chicken pot pie. There's so many things that you could use this chicken for. So while you're doing it, this is why I went on, I did 2 chickens. That way I'm able to use it in so many different ways. I've even froze part of it to use for later use. We vacuum sealed it in bags, but you could freeze it in, sometimes what I'll do is put it in a deli container. I think I'll show it to you at the end of the video. Little deli containers, put the meat in there and then just cover it with some of the broth to keep it moist, and then put that in the freezer. So here I think I got 10 to 12 cups of the chicken, and we are going to return this pot back to the stove. I will bring it up to a boil, and then again, here I'm adding some more water to the pot. I want to make as much broth as I possibly can in that pot. I think it's a 26 quart pot, and I want to fill it to the brim. So we'll bring this back to a boil, and then we'll reduce it to a simmer, and I will let this simmer for about 24 hours. And here we have some apple cider vinegar, and we're going to add a couple of tablespoons of that to our pot. It does not affect the taste. It just helps draw that collagen out of the bones.
All right, so like I said, this broth has been simmering for about 24 hours now. There's only salt and pepper in here. That way that depending on what I use it for, it's pretty neutral. It's not heavily salted either, so that we can control that salt content as we are cooking with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my canning funnel to get this in my jars. And then I'm going to also put a strainer over this. And then we're just going to ladle this. I'm not straining off the fat part of it, because that is good, yummy stuff. Now, if you didn't want to can it with the fat, you could put this in the, strain this, put it in the refrigerator, and then you could scrape off the fat part. But we are leaving that in. All right, I'm gonna get all this ladled up in my jars. I'm gonna probably have to run the canner more than once for the chicken broth, because I made a lot, because I needed a lot. And when you're making your chicken broth, you could put onions, celery, carrots, herbs, you know, whatever it is, if you know what you're going to be using this for. But because I wanted this pretty neutral, I didn't add anything to it. I can always add that later when I'm actually cooking whatever it is I'm cooking. I use my chicken broth for pasta sauces, for soups, for gumbo, for making rice sometimes, depending on what the rice dish is. There's so many uses for chicken broth. It's pretty golden color. All right, I'm gonna get all this jarred up, and then we will get this into the canner. All right, so we got 7 quarts of broth, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pints of broth. I do have some more in here. If you don't want to can, you don't have a pressure canner, you're scared of canning, you can always freeze your chicken broth. You can either do it in a mason jar. If you do it in a mason jar, you need to use this size, or the wide mouth that has a straight side here. It's a wide mouth as opposed to this narrow mouth lid, so that as it freezes, it has room to move. And you also want to give it quite a bit of head space too, because it will expand as it freezes. Another thing I like to do with my broth is run it through the freeze dryer. So I have homemade chicken bouillon powder. I will strain the rest of this because I do have more in my pot. I will strain the rest of this and I'm going to use it this week. I will just put it in the fridge. But right now I am wiping my rims with some vinegar on a paper towel because this was a little greasy and I want to make sure this is clean so it will seal well. All right, so I'm going to run my quarts first, so I have my lids out for my quart jars. And yes, I do reuse my lids one time. And I do inspect them, make sure they're not rusty, they're not stained, they're not dented, anything like that. All right. So I do have my pressure canner. I do have my pressure canner here heating up. I'm gonna get the lid off. We're gonna get these jars in the canner. My pressure canner only takes 7 quart jars at a time. There are 3 quarts of water in this jar. That's by the manufacturer's set of instructions. So that's in there and it's heating up because we have hot broth. We want to put it in hot water here. So let me get the lid off and we'll get these in the canner. Also do have a jar lifter here so that I'm not carrying these hot jars over there. So we'll carry them this way. Look at this gorgeous color of this chicken broth. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I got my jars in here. I'm going to lock my lid in place. I'll turn my temperature up. What we're looking for is, can you see this little vent pipe? We need to squeeze all the air out of the canner, and when that happens, you will start seeing steam coming out of this vent pipe. We will set our timer for 10 minutes once it is venting steadily, and once that 10 minutes is up, we will put our little weight or jiggler or whatever it is on here. We will get our pressure up to whatever your elevation is. You need to look at your area. Usually your canner will give you kind of a guideline. You can look up at the, there's a U.S. government food preservation website, tell you your elevation. You can Google your elevation, whatever it is. And so mine is 11 pounds of pressure. Once we get to there, we will set our timer for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Ooh, I'm gonna have to check that. I think it's 25 minutes for quarts, and we will pressure can these. And once my timer goes off, we will turn our burner off. We will let all the pressure go down. The gauge will go down to 0. And once that happens, then we can take our little jiggler off, release the rest of the pressure, let it sit, because you don't want this opening in your face and an accident happening. Once that all happens, you're going to open it and open it away from your face. You don't want any of that steam coming back in your face. Leave the jars again sitting in the canner for 5-10 minutes to settle out a little bit. You will still see them bubbling inside the jars, and then we will remove them from the canner. They will sit on the counter for 24 hours after you remove them from the canner. So we'll get this going and we'll be back. So I'm not sure if you can see that steam consistently coming out. Ooh, I don't want to put my hand over that. So we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes and watch that. And I did check my owner's manual, and it is 25 minutes for quarts and 20 minutes for pints if you're doing stock. So let me get the timer set and then we will keep going. All right, guys, I'm going to show you this just to show you why it's so important to let all the pressure come down before taking the lid off. Not only is it harmful to you if you have an accident, But I got kind of anxious because I could heard something happen, and obviously the lid popped off of this jar. So I kind of hurried things along to try and get the lid off because I was wanting to see what happened. I wasn't sure if a jar broke. And I had quite a bit of siphoning because the pressure changed too fast. And if you can see, there's quite a bit of stock down on the bottom of this, and my jars have lost some volume. You can see the line in this jar has lost some volume, and I've heard them pop to seal, but I'm kind of concerned that there might be too much grease between the lid and the jar to keep them sealed. So all this work, and there's siphoning that you saw just then. All this work, and I may have to redo it all. So I'm gonna let these continue to cool, and we'll get them out later. All right, this is our chicken broth we were able to make with those 2 chickens. I had about 12 cups of the chicken meat. I think I have 6 quarts of chicken broth and 10 pints of chicken broth. It is a process, but I know where my chicken came from. I got a pasture-raised organic chickens, and I boiled those, and then I made the broth that I can use for so many different applications, pasta sauces, soups, gumbos, making some different rices like jambalaya, variety of things we use chicken broth for. Another option, if you don't want to can, is I purchased these. These are quart size, and I can leave these in the description box. Well, I have a variety of sizes. This one itself is not a quart, but I would stuff these full of chicken and then cover them with the broth and then put those in the freezer. And that's a way to have boiled chicken and broth ready to go at any time if you don't want to can. So I will also leave my playlist of all my canning and food preservation here on the side. You can click on that. You can watch all the different videos I have. I've done many different broths. I've done so many different things. Over here will be my logo for a link to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and you want to do that. And we will see you next time with lots of canning. Okay, I do want to say, sorry, I have wiped all these off with some mild soapy room temperature water to clean them up. Obviously you've seen what happens when you don't follow the instructions on the pressuring. I was concerned that these would not seal because the ones that siphoned quite a bit would have maybe some grease layer between the lid and the jar, but the rings are off. The lid is holding tight. I will check these periodically to make sure that they have stayed sealed. When you do store your jars, you want to take those rings off because you could create a false seal, and this is the only way you would know if your jar is properly sealed. I'm also marking the tops of my jars that it's chicken and it's January 2025. So that's the way you're going to store your jars. And hit subscribe if you want to subscribe. Thanks for watching.